The Shadow of Tyranny, a look at history's most evil dictators. Welcome to our channel. Today we're diving into the dark heart of history, exploring the lives and legacies of some of the most ruthless dictators to ever walk the earth. These figures, driven by a toxic brew of ideology, paranoia, and a lust for power, left an indelible scar on the 20th century, plunging nations into chaos and claiming the lives of millions. From the horrors of the Holocaust to the forced labor camps of the Soviet Gulag, from the killing fields of Cambodia to the famines that ravaged China and North Korea, we'll examine the devastating consequences of unchecked power and the human cost of totalitarian regimes. Get ready to delve into a world of propaganda, fear, and unimaginable cruelty as we uncover the stories behind these dictators and the terrifying efficiency with which they were able to reshape their nations in their own twisted images.
Born in Austria in 1889, I rose from obscurity to become the Chancellor of Germany in 1933, transforming the nation into a totalitarian state ruled by my Nazi party.
Hitler's ideology, a toxic cocktail of nationalism, anti-Semitism, and a belief in German racial superiority, found fertile ground in a country still reeling from the humiliation of defeat in World War I and the economic hardships that followed. Hitler's rise to power was swift and calculated, fueled by his charisma, his mastery of propaganda, and the exploitation of existing social and economic anxieties.
I promised to restore Germany to its former glory, to avenge the Treaty of Versailles, and to create a 1,000-year Reich where the Aryan race would reign supreme.
Central to Hitler's ideology was the demonization of Jews, whom he blamed for Germany's problems. This virulent anti-Semitism, deeply rooted in centuries of European prejudice, formed the basis for the Holocaust, the systematic state-sponsored persecution and murder of 6 million Jews. The Nazi regime, with chilling efficiency, established a network of concentration camps and extermination camps across Europe, where Jews, along with other groups deemed undesirable by the Nazis, such as Roma, LGBTQ+ individuals, political opponents, and people with disabilities, were imprisoned, tortured, and murdered.
In 1939, I unleashed World War II, plunging Europe and the world into the deadliest conflict in human history. Driven by my vision of a German-dominated Europe, my armies swept across the continent, leaving behind a trail of death and destruction.
The war, which raged for 6 long years, claimed the lives of an estimated 40 to 85 million people, leaving much of Europe in ruins. Though Hitler's reign of terror ultimately ended with his suicide in a Berlin bunker in 1945, the scars of his ideology and the horrors he unleashed continue to haunt the world. The legacy of Nazi Germany serves as a chilling reminder of the fragility of peace, the seductive power of hatred, and the importance of vigilance in the face of tyranny.
From the frozen wastelands of Siberia to the bustling streets of Moscow, my iron grip on the Soviet Union cast a long and terrifying shadow.
Rising to power after the Russian Revolution, Stalin transformed a nation yearning for equality into a totalitarian state ruled by fear. Stalin's communism demanded absolute obedience and crushed any dissent. The Soviet Union underwent rapid industrialization and collectivization, but at a horrific human cost.
One of the most devastating chapters was the Holodomor, a man-made famine that ravaged Soviet Ukraine from 1932 to 1933. Driven by my paranoia, the Holodomor resulted in the deaths of millions of Ukrainian peasants.
Through grain confiscations and forced collectivization, Stalin's regime systematically starved a nation. The images of starving children and mass graves serve as a chilling testament to the horrors inflicted upon the Ukrainian people. In the heart of Asia, Mao Zedong, the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, emerged from the ashes of a civil war to reshape China in his own image. A charismatic leader with a vision of a socialist utopia, Mao's policies would have devastating consequences for the Chinese people, leading to one of the deadliest famines in human history.
Mao's rise to power in 1949 marked a turning point in Chinese history. After decades of turmoil, foreign invasion, and civil war, the Chinese Communist Party, under my leadership, promised to usher in a new era of prosperity and equality.
However, Mao's ambitious plans to transform China from an agrarian society into a modern industrial power would have disastrous consequences. In 1958, Mao launched the Great Leap Forward, an ambitious economic and social campaign aimed at rapidly transforming China into a socialist utopia.
Central to this plan was the collectivization of agriculture, the abolition of private property, and the establishment of communes where people were expected to live and work together for the common good.
However, the Great Leap Forward, driven by ideological fervor and a disregard for practical realities, proved to be a catastrophic miscalculation. The forced collectivization of agriculture led to widespread disruption, as farmers, stripped of their land and their livelihoods, were forced to work on communes. The government's unrealistic production targets and the implementation of untested agricultural techniques, such as close planting, led to a sharp decline in agricultural output.
Farmers, under immense pressure to meet quotas, resorted to exaggerating harvests, further masking the true extent of the crisis.
The consequences of the Great Leap Forward were nothing short of catastrophic. The combination of forced collectivization, unrealistic production targets, and widespread government mismanagement triggered a famine of unimaginable proportions. Between 1959 and 1961, an estimated 30 to 45 million people died of starvation and related diseases. In the Southeast Asian nation of Cambodia, Pol Pot, the leader of the Khmer Rouge regime, unleashed a reign of terror that would leave an indelible scar on the country's soul. Driven by a radical ideology that sought to create an agrarian utopia, Pol Pot's regime orchestrated one of the most brutal genocides of the 20th century, claiming the lives of an estimated 1.5 to 2 million people.
My vision for Cambodia was a radical departure from the past. I sought to create a classless agrarian society, free from foreign influence and the corruptions of modern life.
Cities were emptied, money was abolished, and religion was banned. Anyone deemed an enemy of the revolution, including intellectuals, professionals, monks, and even those who wore eyeglasses, was targeted for elimination. Under the cover of darkness, the Khmer Rouge, led by Pol Pot's inner circle, transformed Cambodia into a giant prison camp. The country's cities and towns were emptied, their inhabitants forced into labor camps in the countryside. Families were torn apart, children were separated from their parents, and everyone was subjected to forced labor, starvation, and indoctrination.
The Khmer Rouge's reign of terror was characterized by its brutality and its utter disregard for human life. Torture, executions, and mass graves became commonplace, as the regime sought to eliminate anyone suspected of disloyalty or opposition.
The infamous killing fields, scattered across the Cambodian countryside, stand as grim reminders of the regime's barbarity. One of the most notorious sites of Khmer Rouge atrocities was the Tuol Sleng Genocide Museum, a former high school that was transformed into a torture center known as Security Prison 21, or S21. Here, prisoners were subjected to unimaginable horrors, including beatings, electric shocks, waterboarding, and being forced to eat their own excrement.
The Khmer Rouge's reign of terror finally came to an end in 1979 when Vietnamese forces invaded Cambodia and drove the regime from power.
In the Hermit Kingdom of North Korea, Kim Jong-il presided over one of the most isolated and repressive regimes in the world. His rule, characterized by a cult of personality, economic mismanagement, and widespread human rights abuses, plunged the nation into famine.
I inherited power from my father, Kim Il-sung, in 1994. I continued my father's policy of Juche, emphasizing isolation and loyalty to the Kim dynasty.
Under his rule, North Korea became a totalitarian state. One of the defining features was the Arduous March, a period of severe famine. The famine was caused by economic mismanagement, natural disasters, and the collapse of the Soviet Union.
The government's response was inadequate, prioritizing military spending over aid.
As a result, millions of North Koreans, especially in rural areas, starved. The Arduous March had a devastating impact on society. The famine left a lasting scar on the population, both physically and psychologically. The government maintained a vast network of prison camps, where political prisoners faced torture and forced labor. Beyond the famine, the regime was notorious for its human rights abuses. North Korea, under Kim Jong-il, was a closed society, shrouded in secrecy. Thanks for watching. If you found this video informative, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Let us know in the comments which historical figure you'd like us to cover next. It's essential to remember that behind these larger-than-life figures of tyranny were millions of individual stories of suffering, resilience, and in many cases, extraordinary courage in the face of unimaginable evil. By learning about these atrocities, by understanding the conditions that allowed them to occur, we can work to ensure that such horrors are never repeated. Ultimately, the study of history, even its darkest chapters, is a call to action. It's a reminder that we are not passive observers, but active participants in shaping the course of human events. By confronting the evils of the past, by holding perpetrators accountable, and by working to build a more just and equitable world, we can honor the victims of these atrocities and strive to create a future free from the scourge of tyranny and oppression.